Want to hear something mind-blowing? Humanity has been roaming the Earth as sapiens for 300,000 years. Our industrial revolutions, massive monuments, skyscrapers, millions of kilometers of roads, and all our landmarks. Despite everything, we've built something incredible. It's like we've left a mark on eternity, right? Even if we vanish millions of years from now, the universe will always remember us. All our scientific and literary progress feels like a different kind of immortality. But here's the sobering part. If humanity disappeared from Earth today, and 500 million years later, a new humanity emerged somewhere and looked around, they wouldn't find even a pinpoint of our existence. Not our colossal monuments, not our sky-piercing buildings, nor any of our industrial masterpieces. They'd all be long gone. It's a bit disheartening to think about, isn't it? But you know what this fact also does? It raises a super intriguing question. If this is the case, could it be that we aren't the first civilization on Earth? Were there advanced, industrialized, technologically sophisticated civilizations before us? Are we perhaps living in the graveyard of one or even several such civilizations? Ones that ruled the world, built colossal monuments, and then vanished along with everything they created? Pretty fascinating question, right? And a bit eerie. Let's dive into the possibilities. This is something I bet lots of people have pondered, and it's the subject of countless theories. It's been explored in speculative fiction a few times too. There are even claims that these ancient civilizations didn't actually disappear, but crossed certain thresholds and now walk among us as famous figures. But that's not our focus. We're going to explore this fascinating question through a study that frames it beautifully. In 2018, an article was published by Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt. Frank is a physicist and astronomer, while Schmidt is a climate scientist who has worked at NASA. By the way, the claim they put forward as a thought experiment is called the Silurian Hypothesis, a kind of concept they named. The name Silurian caught the attention of Doctor Who fans. In the series, Silurians are a species awakened from a 400 million year slumber during a nuclear test. Some of Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank's arguments are as follows. Let's be clear. They don't personally believe in the existence of prior civilizations. However, using the scientific method, they frame this question as a thought experiment and put forward some thought-provoking arguments. This shifts the question away from whether other humanoid species existed and went extinct. The real question here is whether other industrial civilizations, like ours, or even more advanced, ever existed. First, we need to acknowledge this. Yes, humanity has an ancient history stretching back 300,000 years. But we've only recently begun to industrialize, whether for better or worse, and to build massive cities as a result, leaving our mark on the world. Our real impact has only been in the last few hundred years. So, we have to admit, we're a very young civilization. When we compare these few hundred years to Earth's history, we know the planet has existed for 4.5 billion years. If an incredibly advanced civilization existed at any point during these 4.5 billion years, and somehow went extinct, finding traces of it would be impossible. Or, if not impossible, extremely difficult. The reason lies in the very nature of Earth. Though the planet seems stable to us, if we could fast forward through its 4.5 billion year history, we'd see it behaving like an incredibly dynamic organism. Continents, mountains, and oceans are constantly shifting. Today's mountains were once beneath oceans, or nearly our entire current crust was melted in the mantle, reset, and reformed on the surface over the last few million years. Rock and soil layers follow this cycle, which, roughly every 500 million years, wipes out whatever existed before. Now this cycle has a key consequence. The vast majority of the Earth's surface we walk on today is no older than 2.6 million years. Yes, we've found fossils from hundreds of millions of years ago, but that's an incredibly rare occurrence. We'll get to that in a bit. There's also this. The cities where most of today's 8 billion people live cover just 1% of Earth's surface. So, the chances of finding remnants of anything built by a highly advanced ancient civilization at our current level of development are extremely slim. Because fossilization is an incredibly rare process, it requires so many specific conditions to occur. There needs to be pressure and almost no oxygen present. That's why we've only found fossils from a tiny fraction of the species that dominated Earth for hundreds of millions of years. For this reason, detecting any civilizations that existed before us would be an extremely difficult task. However, we can look for certain traces in Earth's rock layers. Consider this. It takes about 1,000 years for a 1 centimeter layer of rock to form. If humanity vanished today, a civilization emerging millions of years later would find that our existence corresponds to a 300-centimeter layer of rock when examining the strata. Our entire history, all our creations, amount to just a 3-meter-thick candidate for a remnant from Earth's perspective. If we consider only the post-industrial era, everything we've built in the modern world wouldn't even amount to a single centimeter. Now, if we approach the search for ancient civilizations from this angle, if such a civilization existed and went extinct, our chances of finding it are slim. But if we were to find anything, it would be in the traces they left behind in these rock layers. We're not talking about fossils. These rock layers carry traces of every aspect of the era in which they formed. In particular, we can see signs of changes in the atmosphere and oceans here. So, if a civilization like ours existed and, like us, developed technology through an industrial revolution, it most likely relied on fossil fuels. We could detect traces of a civilization like ours, which altered the atmosphere's composition with fossil fuels in these rock layers, particularly through carbon signatures. Here's where it gets interesting. A strange fluctuation was detected in a rock layer dating back about 56 million years. This is known as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. Rock records show this thermal maximum lasted about 200,000 years. How does that sound? It's a duration close to the time we've been on this planet. In other words, long enough for an intelligent species to emerge and disappear. Analyses show that during this period, the Earth's climate was very mild. A time when you could walk around in a t-shirt, basically. There's also evidence of significant carbon emissions during this period. Now, these carbon emissions don't directly indicate the existence of a civilization. Back then, of course, because such spikes are more commonly caused by intense volcanic activity or asteroid impacts. So, this information doesn't directly prove the existence of an ancient civilization. But an intriguing finding is that a few million years after this event, another mysterious layer appears in the rock records. Here, too, there's significant carbon emission. Essentially, the changes we see in these periods are typically sudden temperature spikes and elevated carbon levels. But as we mentioned, there could be many natural causes for this. Similarly, millions of years from now, scientists studying the layers we leave behind might see us as an anomaly in Earth's history. We're also causing sudden temperature spikes and leaving behind strange elements. But they might not be able to tell if these are directly the remnants of a civilization. That's why the remnants we've observed from the past are most likely due to natural causes. But what if they aren't? That's the fascinating paradox it points to. Moreover, if we were to discover the existence and extinction of multiple advanced civilizations in these rock layers, what would that knowledge give us? First, this knowledge could guide us in our search for intelligent life. The possibility that a civilization could arise multiple times on a single planet dramatically increases the potential number of intelligent life forms in the universe. It even suggests that ancient civilizations could have existed on Mars or Venus, which once had habitable climates. But most importantly, this knowledge would make us reflect on our place on this planet. It can show us how fragile we might be. In fact, it's a reminder that on this planet we consider ours, we could end up as just a few centimeters of residue. Civilizations that once ruled the world for thousands of years, believing they'd last forever, only to be buried in the dusty pages of history, are already telling us something. We don't even need to look millions of years into the past. In short, even though the authors of the hypothesis don't believe in such a possibility, pondering this question is quite an enjoyable exercise. As always, until we meet again, thank you for being here.